same thing. What's the role of things like open source software in this kind of thing?
Well, open source is a fantastic space to allow for, creativity to happen in new ways. The question, I guess, we think more broadly just than open source software. We did a whole piece of work nearly 20 years ago, dare I say it, on the concept of open platform innovation, right? So really understanding the value of the platform and creating that space for people to innovate off the platform that you own. So whether it's a piece of software, if you own the core IP and allow others to innovate and create and produce, whether could be a tourism website, again, where it's you own the platform, but get others into the space. It's that platform thinking that I think becomes powerful and useful in that space. The most obvious one, of course, is the Apple ecosystem, right? They own the platform, and they push all the risk off to developers. They've got a system whereby you can qualify to be on their platform, and they leverage that to the hilt. So thinking open platform innovation, being part of creating and owning the platform that others use can be a pretty powerful way to reimagine what's possible. There's a whole bunch of thinking we've done. We've put it on here, micro-manufacturing. That's not about making small stuff. It's about a new business model for manufacturing. I saw Brett on earlier. I don't know if Brett's still with us, but we've had lots of conversations with Brett and with Anne about micro-manufacturing as a new way of thinking about product development, product design, development, production, channels to market, all that sort of stuff. There's real richness if we're prepared to let go of the way we used to do it and think collectively, right, into what else is possible. One of the great things about some of those micro-manufacturing spaces is the wisdom and power of the community to collaborate to help someone innovate without feeling like you've got to have a stake in that apart from being part of a community of innovators. So this group here, networking through Startup Shakeup, really thinking about how do we support each other to be innovative. Healthy systems mean it's healthy for everyone. So you're seeing others flourish and thrive and supporting others to do that is a critical part to each of you surviving and thriving in a COVID economy.
And I think I'd just extend an invitation to everybody involved in tourism and wine that's come on today. Please have a serious think about the workshops, and we'll tell you more about those later today.
Absolutely. All right, with about 20 minutes to go, just thinking about some of those opportunities and risks, how well would you say you really understand them for yourself, your community, your organization? How well do you understand the opportunities, and how well do you understand the risks? Have you done the work to do a conditions analysis with a whole systems view to then say, what are the risks and opportunities I see in that space? Just while we're answering, I'm just reading a comment about virtual tourism. I tend to agree with that. I think it's about leveraging online to help people understand what's possible. We do some work with commercial fishing, and connecting people to product, for example, is a really powerful part of what they've been thinking about. Most of the value of our commercial seafood industry in Victoria disappears overseas. They've been thinking for the last couple of years about how do you relocalize and reshape experiences hooked into local industry. For those of you who haven't necessarily connected, and I'm not sure you would have, but the Apollo Bay Seafood Festival is a great example of how they rethought the experience of bringing people to a local place and connecting to local product and local people, back to that tourism question. And they were able to, this is pre-COVID, of course, but a seafood festival that traditionally attracted 2,000 or 3,000 people, with some tweaks, which again, we can go into in the workshops, and maybe even connect Jonathan Davey, who's the CEO, in to share some of that. They increased attendance to the seafood festival to about 10,000 people. and created a whole bunch of high value experiences around that people were prepared to pay significantly more than they used to for that. And oddly enough, this is going to sound very strange, but the single biggest change that they made to the seafood, well, the two biggest changes they made to the seafood festival to create that energy momentum. One, they made sure that all the seafood available at the festival was Victorian seafood, which had never been done before. And that seems really strange to have a local seafood festival that doesn't feature just Victorian seafood. The other thing they did is they worked with the fishers and said, look, for the festival, how about you hang around and talk to people rather than getting on your boats and going out fishing for the 3 days? And they created all these really interesting events in around, have a beer in the pub with the local fishers, and they did panels with fishers, and they hooked in I can't remember which celebrity chef from Melbourne. He came down and did a $250 a head, featuring only Apollo Bay seafood and other Apollo Bay produce, and they sold it out in 2 days. That sort of stuff to create local experience that really features the local economy, local producers, local talent, and building momentum. I think they did that flip about 3 years ago, and they get regularly now 8,000 to 10,000 people at the Seafood Festival. Not that hard to do with just a bit of thinking about what else is possible.
Another example, David, is the Buy from Northeast Vic project that Startup Shakeup and a lot of the local councils have been involved in, where the aim is to create an online version of the regional high street. Yeah. And that's for local people, but it's also for people in Melbourne who love these local towns and communities.
And that's very much platform-based thinking, right? Create the platform and hook lots of people into that platform and leverage that collective energy and experience. So, Irene, thank you for the comment. Very good comment and a thought-provoking one. Thank you. So, a couple of final thoughts as we round out today's session. So, the first is a very quick introduction to how we deal with all of these questions. Leveraging disruption through what we call strategy in action. And it's the in action bit that's really important. The simplest way to think about it is good strategic thinking followed as closely in time as possible by strategic action. The word I haven't used there is plan. And there's a reason for that. A strategic plan is, in my view, a waste of time and paper and energy, and often opens up more debates about whose data is right or not. This is about strategy in action, using good information and data, but it's the inaction bit that matters. When thinking about this, you've got to deal with it in 3 domains. There's the organization, community, and both that you're a part of. There's you in those contexts. You might be a leader, you might be part of a team, you might have formal roles, informal roles, and so on. And then there's what does this mean for you as an individual. So you've got to have those 3 hats on all the time, and you can apply this at those scales as well. It's about resetting. It's a reset of mindset. There's then a reset of skill set and a reset of strategic focus. The mindset one is a bit, once you reset your mindset to thinking and acting in this way, that's not done and dusted, but then you're in that mindset. The skill set, of course, is ever changing. There's some baseline skills for leveraging disruption, but then the other skills that you layer on top of that align to where the world is become really important. And your strategic focus has to change as often as the conditions change, because it's the conditions that determine where we should be focusing, not us. So, a quick question before I really explain what this is about. How many of you would say you've got the mindset to leverage disruption in this new COVID economy? And what about the skill set to do it? Yeah, and there's Irene's again made a comment. Yeah, interesting to see how the situation has forced people to think and act differently. Yeah, absolutely. Can we capture the energy and momentum to take this forward? What I would assert absolutely is that in March and April, virtually every person on the planet was using strategy in action. They just didn't know it and didn't necessarily have a language to make sense of it and carry it forward. But the best that we could do was think ahead of what we were seeing by a couple of days, sometimes a couple of hours, and then tune our action to try to be aligned to the reality that we were in. That's what strategy in action is. You tune your actions to the reality of the world as it is and where it's going. So we all have practiced this. Some were pretty good at it and some were not. And some, as was pointed out before, were in conditions that didn't allow them to necessarily make the changes that they would like to have made or needed to make to really leverage the disruption that we've been experiencing.
David, picking up on Irene's point there, is there something here where it's not just about realising and capturing what it is that we're doing, it's about monitoring the outcomes of what we're doing?
Yeah.
So that this is what we did and this was the outcome, so that we've then got the evidence that people like governments and funding bodies want.
And if the outcome wasn't what we thought it was going to be, acknowledging that that's okay too. Either we've learned something that we can take forward, or we've learned something that we should stop because we didn't get what we wanted to get. One of the things that's a real challenge, of course, is that funding structures at the moment typically don't allow you to go, look, we started on this path and then realized it wasn't the right path, so we'd like to use the balance of the funding to go in that direction. But that's often what you need to do, because you learn as you go as to what really works.
Which is about writing your goals in a way that allow you to encompass that kind of activity if you need to.
Well, and it's about understanding that the goal that you have at the start is not necessarily fixed. It's the best view of where you think you can go based on the information you have at the time. But as you get into action and you learn, as you progress through the systems that you're a part of, the goal may shift or the pathway to the goal may shift. And what you develop along the way can become quite powerful as well. I'm going to go through the framework really quickly. The workshops are designed to actually go through and practice elements of this framework so that you can get into action reasonably quickly and start using the thinking and the tools. We call it strategy in action. This is the little symbol that we use to represent the thinking. There's 5 elements to it. The first one I've spoken to a number of times already. It's about understanding immediate and emergent conditions at scale. We use the language of conditions because we find that people actually know what conditions are. We know what health conditions are. We know what weather conditions are. When you speak to conditions, you speak to reality. If it's raining, it's raining. We don't pretend like it's not raining if it's raining. And we act accordingly in the rain. So when you deal with the reality of conditions, it's a way of aligning people very quickly to what's going on in the world, what could emerge, and hooking into our intuitive sense of how we operate in the world. Based on conditions, we then identify opportunities and risks. So for us, strategy is not about necessarily grand visions and missions and moonshots, sometimes appropriate, but it's about what's real in the conditions, both immediate and emergent. So sticking to my rain example, if it's raining and I want to do something in the rain, the capabilities that I might require, and I'll go to that in a second, well, the opportunities and risks are based on what I want to do in the rain. So if I want to have a picnic and it's raining, then I'm better change my plans, have a picnic at another time because there's too much risk. If the radar is telling me that what's behind the light rain on a Monday is a cyclone on a Thursday, then my risk goes way up and my opportunity comes way down. It's all based on reality, and the radar tells me what's emerging. The rain that's sprinkling nicely on a Monday tells me what's immediate. We then look at what value do you want to generate and aligning that to the conditions through our networks. So again, in the rain, if I want to have a picnic and the cyclone's coming, I might postpone the picnic and have it in 2 weeks' time. Equally, if I'm a farmer, then I do want rain, and I see that as a positive thing. It's the same condition because the value I want to generate is a healthy and productive crop. If I get too much rain too soon, then it can damage my crop as well. So there's always a balance. The point that I'm making is that it's all the same set of conditions. Our view of those as good, bad, or indifferent is based on the value that we're trying to generate. We too often, I think, get focused on is a condition good or bad. It has nothing to do with the condition. It has to do with what we're trying to achieve in that context. Based on that, we then look to what capabilities are required. If I want to go for a walk in the rain and I don't want to get wet, I might need an umbrella. Pretty simple in that analogy. You play that into bigger strategic questions. What's my reality? What's emerging? What are the opportunities and risks? What value do I want to generate, or what value do I think is possible to generate based on addressing some of those opportunities and risks, ideally with a bit of priority and sequencing, and then what capabilities are required to do that. The final bit of the framework is you do that through targeted catalytic action. It's the test and learn mentality. You put an action into the system, you get feedback. Based on the feedback, you put the next action into the system. you can write the best plan,